All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the March Planning Commission meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and start with our normal housekeeping item here, the minutes from the previous meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look those over? Do you have any questions regarding the minutes from last month? If not, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor, notice by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. All righty, we got a couple of unfinished items here we need to look at. We got the rezoning of property C2 to College Hill Zone, located at 111 and 114 West Harold Drive, submitted by Barrett and Associates on behalf of Joseph Stokel. Did I say that right? And Keith and Helen Ledbetter. Do you have staff report, Sarah?
Absolutely, thank you. So this is a rezoning over on West Harold Drive in the University Place District from C2 to College Hill Zone. The existing conditions, there are 2 single-family dwellings on a total of 4 lots. The subdivision is located behind a child development center owned by ATU and to the west of University Plaza development in the University Place District. Again, it is currently zoned C2 Highway Commercial, and the adjacent property is owned by ATU to the west and south, which is zoned R3 and R1 respectively, and properties to the east and north are zoned C2 and R3. The future and current land uses of the area. So while the future land use map indicates that this area is to be used for suburban single-family residences, it is adjacent to an institutional campus, Arkansas Tech University. The College Hill Zone was created to complement the university campus. Thus, it is rational to consider that the entire area around the university to be fit for the zoning category. So while this property is not directly next to the other College Hill zoning on the southern side of ATU, it is reasonable to assume that the university would bisect a particular zoning district, especially one that is related to the university with a College Hill zoning. So the comprehensive plan recommendations, so 2 properties to the west are both defined as institutional campus, which is described as areas composed of large-scale campuses. These campuses could be office complexes, college campuses, large public schools, or other similarly outlined land uses. With this definition in mind, it is fair to consider that this property would be more correctly defined as institutional campus, as it is disconnected from many other parts of the community. A zoning district that aligns with the university would make sense and would therefore align with the comprehensive plan. The value or income potential of the property. So one of the things that you need to consider when rezoning a property is the value or income potential. It is important to consider that this request is not based exclusively on a desire to increase the value of the income potential of the property when reviewing a zone map adjustment. The current zone would not permit the development of a student housing complex. Changing the zone to C2 to College Hill Zone would increase the development potential of the property. However, C2 highway commercial zones typically have a higher return on investment than College Hill Zone, so regardless of the proposed project not being permitted in the current zoning, it is reasonable to think that this rezoning is feasible. So the recommendation, staff does recommend that the commission forward this application to City Council for approval as a result of the finding that it is in line with existing and future land uses within the area. The proposal aligns with Reimagine Russellville 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and there is no increase of value or income potential of the property. That is my staff report. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. That's, Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, what I'll probably do is defer until large scale. So
Okay, that'd be fine.
you're okay with that. Unless you have questions specifically about stuff.
No, we'll just do everything Dave wants to do. That's okay. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. It got too serious for a second. I couldn't have any of that. So, Does anybody have any questions for Sarah or for Dave, either one, in regards to this rezone? And if not, what is your pleasure? Okay, we have a motion to approve. We have a second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor of this motion, acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay, well, now that we've got it rezoned, now we're going to need to, we've got a large-scale development at the same place. Sarah, you got anything else to add to that? Is that
Yes, so item 2 is a large-scale development for that same complex. It's called University Lofts. It is a 120-unit, micro-unit apartment complex. Very similar existing conditions, surprisingly. There are 2 single-family dwellings on 4 lots. Subdivision is behind Child Development Center, West University Plaza Development. Currently, well, it's in the process of changing to College Hill Zone. And all of the review done for the large-scale development application was done with the understanding that it would be rezoned College Hill. It is adjacent to ATU property, as we just discussed. So this review is being done with the understanding that the rezoning request will be approved. If the rezoning request is not approved, this application should be withdrawn, as apartment buildings are not permitted in C2. The proposed building will be placed over platted lot lines, and as a result, an incidental subdivision application will be required prior to permit issuance. College Hill zoning area requirements are different than typical zoning code. Additional items shall be met prior to the building permit issuance, including a built-to zone, which the proposal already meets, instead of a traditional building setback line. So it's closer to the street than typical zoning code. There are streetscape standards that the application has already shown to be in compliance with. There are first floor height requirements, which will not be able to be confirmed with this application, but will be confirmed with the building permit application, and screened parking requirements, which the applicant is proposing to meet. And so as a result of all of that is staff's recommendation to approve the application with the following conditions. This approval shall be revoked if the rezoning application is not approved by City Council to rezone the property to College Hill Zone. The first floor height minimum shall be 12 feet and will be required to be verified with the building permit application, and an incidental subdivision to replat the property will be required. This is as a result of the findings that the applicant demonstrates compliance with the regulations within Article 2.18, that's the El Paso University District of the Russellville Zoning Code, and the applicant demonstrates compliance with the regulations within Section 7 of the Land Subdivision and Development Code. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are we concerned at all about traffic in that area with another 120 units?
The roads in that area are already built to handle the traffic. However, they are making some improvements to the streetscape there along West Harold Drive, and they are going to be doing a little bit more with the sidewalks and drainage along Red Hill is the proposal. Yes, sir. So we have an email from Arkansas Tech University that shows that they are not in opposition to this application, and that they are willing to work with the city and the applicant to get some improvements on Red Hill Lane. Are there any other questions?
Dave, you got anything you want to add to that?
David Garza with Barrett and Associates. This isn't the first time at this location that we're seeing something like this. If you will recall, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a developer who was going to go to the property north of this, coming off of Lakefront Drive, and was going to build apartments. We went through a whole site plan, a review, I think with staff. This is before Sarah was here, and then they just pulled out. So it's not the first time that something like this has been proposed for this area. But with this building, it does allow tech then to be able to meet the needs for the incoming students to have a place to stay, but at the same time not use up their agricultural land. And that's been a big point with some of the people with tech, and I think even some of those that give funding and stuff, that the agriculture's land is going away, but yet this was built, the tech was an agricultural school. So this allows in housing in a different location, but yet still adjacent to Arkansas Tech, and to meet those needs. It's going to be, as you can see the picture, it's not the first building that this developer has built. He's built it in other places around the state, and so this isn't something new for him. And the proposal meets everything that the design, it all meets the zoning that we are asking the city to rezone to in the College Hill zone. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the architect. He's going to just talk about a few amenities. One thing about traffic, though, that we were talking about, and we did discuss this before, what we're going to try to do, the parking lot is on the east side of the building. As the students exit, we're going to have a sign there that we're hoping to direct them to the left. We want them to go left as they come out on Harold Drive, come down Red Hill Drive, and then come back Phoenix to the light. And so they're going to try and encourage all their students, and probably also have handouts, pamphlets, that, hey, if you're going to drive out of here, this is the direction that you should take during these certain hours, because we all know it's a little congested sometimes on Arkansas Avenue. So we're hoping that will help them to do that. And once they get into that pattern of doing that, and they see that it's faster, easier, safer, I think they'll continue to do that. So that's one of the things that we're going to try to do.
State your name for the record, if you would,
Yes.
sir.
Jamie McFadden. I'm the architect working for the developer and representing the owner tonight. Just wanted to share a few bullet points about the building that we're proposing to build. It's described as luxury micro loft apartments. They will be fully furnished. We're proposing a 3-level building that with each unit averaging about 440 square feet, 120 units. The primary target is off-campus student housing, but a secondary market of traveling medical professionals, and that's just based on other buildings. That was a surprise tenant that we've been filling a need for. Security will be of great importance and will be taken into account. I have a nice lobby on the ground floor with an exercise room as the only interior amenity proposed. Let's see what else. Oh, the owner has family in this area and is taking great pride in this and wants this to be a flagship building and something that they can be proud of and that it really enhances this community. Any questions about the building?
All right, thank you, sir. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah, Dave, or Mr. McFadden? All right, Commissioner Black has got a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Mr. Jackamore seconds. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. All right. Now to new business. Got outside service agreement for Eagles Crest subdivision submitted by Barrett and Associates on behalf of Michael Poole. Sarah, you have a staff report on that for us?
Yes, sir. So this is an outside service agreement for Eagle Crest subdivision. It is a request for domestic water service to service 28 lots in the county. So the existing conditions, this is outside our legally defined planning boundary, so it's not subject to the rules and the requirements of the Land Subdivision and Development Code. As you can see here, it is within 1 mile of city limits. That red line is the city limits line, so it's within 1 mile. A correction from the staff report, the property is actually 57.36 acres. Pope County parcels had it at 42 acres, so I apologize for that. The proposal, again, it's for 28 country-style lots. They range in size from 1.0 acres to 4.97 acres. It is noted as single-family suburban on the future land use plan. The only water availability is through the city of Russellville. When the city took over and determined that they were servicing Cove Landing with water service, they cut out this box in red there from Tri-County Water. So the only water option that they have is from the city of Russellville and City Corporation. So, as I've just stated, we're the only option that they have for water. So if this property were to develop, even just to build one single-family home on the property, it would have to obtain water from the city of Russellville, from City Corporation. Their request is for domestic potable water service only. The request does not include fire service protection. Just because it doesn't include fire service protection does not mean that the city of Russellville would not respond to a call for help for fire. We're actually in an auto aid response for this area because Crow Mountain Fire Department is a volunteer fire department. And so as soon as Crow Mountain gets the call, the city of Russellville is also dispatched. And so the city of Russellville response time, according to our GIS maps, we are within a 5-mile response distance and an 8-minute response time. Again, that's for auto aid. So just because their request doesn't include fire service protection does not mean we will not be out there trying to do our best to help those families up there. The water service pressure is sufficient only to provide service for domestic use. So as a result of that being, this is their only option for water, and the request is for domestic water service only, it is staff's recommendation to forward this to City Council for consideration and approval for a domestic potable water service for Eagle Crest subdivision with the following condition, which is a similar condition that we put on all of our outside water service agreements, is that they would complete an annexation agreement for the entire subdivision that says at a future date when the city determines to annex the property that they would not object to annexation at that time. Again, at a future date. And that is as a result of the findings below, that there is no adverse impact to the water system. The applicant is aware and has acknowledged that the connection is for domestic potable water only and does not include capacity for fire service protection. City Corporation has already approved the application to extend the water line, and City Corporation has approved the application to connect and recommends connection. Are there any questions?
What size is the water line going to it?
It's a 4-inch water line.
Is 4 inch going to be enough for 28 homes? And sprinkler systems, if they decide to put a sprinkler system in? No, they can't. That's what you said, potable water only.
Domestic potable water only.
Okay, well. Yeah, that's going to be a restriction. Okay, if the city decides to annex it in, then they won't have any hydrants out there. Right at the down on the road down there? Yeah, I kind of know where that is. Okay, so, and how far is that to the nearest home?
Well, it's adjacent to the lot, the first lot.
First lot, so the furthest home would be pretty good ways away from it. Okay, if that's, you know, people are going to buy these, they need to know all this information.
Dave, do you have anything you want to add?
So Eagles Crest subdivision is a subdivision of 28 homes, as Sarah has said. It's good to see that we've got some subdivisions going on now. This is the first one I've worked on in probably over a year, even though it's outside the city limits. It's a beautiful area if you've ever been up there. It's a John Hawkins, used to be his pasture land. So the lots to the south have the overlook into the valley, and then some of the lots on the north end between Richland Hills and that, there's a ravine that's pretty deep, and so it's kind of has a view to the north. It's a beautiful area. I've walked through this about 6 times, just going through, outlining the center of the streets, finding the property corners, and it's just really has some really neat features to it. But these lots are going to be bigger. They're a little bit larger than Richland Hills. Richland Hills has, I think, 76 lots up there. This is only 28. It's the last part of the available land at this location. Both, like I said, Richland Hills to the north is all developed. All the tracks, most of the tracks to the east are already developed with homes or they're owned. So this is only remaining land in this location that you can develop. The Richland Hills line has a 3-inch, but one good thing about Richland Hills is they also have a pump station, which is going to help with the pressure. They have a pump station at the beginning that was constructed. Zane, how long ago was that? Zane, the pump station, when was it built? About 2000? Okay. So after City Corp went through all their calculations, they determined that there would be pressure and volume. We went ahead and put in a 4-inch line because there's a 4-inch on Apple Lane that we can tie into, and we figured, well, let's put in a 4-inch line so at least we keep the upsize, match the same line as that as opposed to a 3-inch, and then the 2-inch lines will cut off. It's not going to allow sprinkler systems, and so that's not only going to be in the restricted covenants, but probably in the deeds as well, or just the restrictive covenants.
Well, it'll be a master set of
Right.
style that will carry to each
Right.
bank, so each deed is that.
So each person will know, each lot will know that they can't do that. And then, of course, it will be monitored. Well, with the new monitoring system, the City Corp will be able to tell how much volume somebody's using now that they have a system that they can see at the office. So they'll be able to see if something, if they have a high volume, it's going to trigger an alarm, and then they're going to run out there and see what's going on. So that's a second safety factor. Yes, sir.
What is the pressure? I'm sorry, what is the pressure? What is the pressure?
75, wasn't it? Mhm. Yeah, and we're on the lower side. Richland Hill's higher than us.
Yeah,
But it was
that's
75.
okay.
Yeah. And that's what the pumps is there for, too, to keep that pressure up. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they, like I said, City Corp went through all the calculations. They checked everything, and we've had several meetings with the staff, and pretty much confident that everything's going to be fine. Otherwise, they wouldn't have approved the extension. I think that's it. I think the developers wants to make a comment.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure. I'll be available if you have any other questions.
Good evening, Braden Vaughn on behalf of Eagle Crest Partners. We've reviewed the agreement. City Corp has approved it. One issue that has come up after the approval is we were presented with this annexation agreement. I don't know if y'all are familiar with those, but essentially this agreement requires us and all subsequent owners of the lots in this subdivision to consent to annexation. That could be next year, that could be 10 years from now, it could be 15 years from now. One particular issue with that is something that we're going to have to disclose to any potential buyers in this process. So when we're selling a lot that's a country-style lot that is not in the city limits of Russellville, we're going to have to tell these buyers, this could potentially be annexed, and by the way, we have given away your right to vote on that. So if you are presented with the petition to annex, you have to agree to that, whether they like that or not. Now, that is probably going to be a hard conversation to have with regular everyday people. Y'all deal with it every day, so you're probably more familiar with that. But that particular provision will run with the land and bind all subsequent buyers of this property. I have gone back and looked at the ordinance 1458, which sets out, you have to have these various approvals to get an extension outside of the city limits. Annexation is not a requirement set forth in that ordinance. So this body does not have to require annexation in order to give us water. It's simply just not in the ordinance. And I'm not sure, in particular, like Richland Hills, Cove Landing, I don't think that they were required to sign basically a pre-annexation agreement prior to the city providing them water. Several other issues with that annexation agreement, depending on when that is, if they present a petition for annexation a year from now, someone buying this lot would have to comply with the city codes when they initially bought the lot that is outside of the city's jurisdiction. Another thing is if we sign that to get water, someone could present us with the petition to annex, and it changes the entire scope of our project, because then we have to come into compliance, and that could be halfway through our development. It could be 10 years from now. We don't know. A third issue that I have, and I don't know the answer to this, so essentially when you're giving someone's rights away on the front end to vote on something, I could see in the future potential landowners fighting that annexation agreement, because essentially the developers would be giving away someone's constitutional right to vote on an issue. And it's so for those reasons we're asking y'all to approve the extension outside of the city limits, but we are requesting that you do not require us to sign a pre-annexation agreement prior to the same. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Sarah, would you care to respond to that, if you don't mind?
The requirement for an annexation agreement just protects the city. Anytime you're requesting service outside the jurisdiction, you're asking for that jurisdiction to provide you services. It is then considerable to think that you may be asked to annex at some point in the future when the city moves in that direction. I was just trying to pull up on my map with our comprehensive plan, we had an annexation map, and this area is not actually outlined in that annexation map in the next 10 to 12 years. If an annexation that happened in this area in particular, we're looking at 15 to 20 years from now. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that information. The outside service agreements that we've done since I've been here all included the requirement that they file for a consent to annex, just as a way to protect the city in the future.
Mr. Mayor, you have any input on this?
I read through that annexation agreement this afternoon, actually, and I had the same concern that Mr. Vaughn expressed. I don't know how you give away your constitutional right to vote on an issue. And I don't know how the developers can give away future purchasers of that property their constitutional right to vote yes or no on an annexation issue. So, that troubles me just as a citizen of the United States of America, that somebody's going to sign away my rights to vote. That's all I got to say about it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I've got a question, and Mr. Sadian may be able to help me. The problem I have with being 1 mile from the city limits, and I know we monitor that, but if we do annex this in and it does not support the fire code, and how are we going to address that if it does get annexed in and we can't respond to that? And that hurts our fire rating quite a bit if we don't have fire hydrants within so many feet of the residents. There's one way in. I mean, there's a lot of questions. If we do go and it does get annexed in, then what is our liability on that end?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something that we're faced with, every city's faced with. So when you annex a property, is it substandard? Does it meet your standards? Now, so there have been situations in which there's this gray area, and there are other times when it made sense for them to meet those minimum requirements of fire protection, in a situation like this, as far as prior to annexation. So, to answer your question, the way the state code is lined out, if I can just back up just a minute. So, the legislature passes a state code, building code, Volume 1 fire, Volume 2 building, Volume 3 residential. Okay. When you look at that, does it apply statewide? Of course, the state legislature passes it to be a blanket law. But the reality of it is, if you build a church up in Pelser, Arkansas, okay, the code says if your load or if more than 300 people are seated in that church, you have to have a sprinkler system. But is it reasonable or practical to require this church out in the middle of nowhere to put a sprinkler system? Well, it's not, because how would they do it? Well, they'd have to put a water tank in. I sound like I'm beating around the bush. There are properties that is not reasonable or not practical without a unreasonable expense to meet those minimum requirements of the fire protection of the state code. So what I have to do, if it's outside, so we're all required to maintain our jurisdiction and as a courtesy, not render any decisions outside our jurisdiction unless we're asked to do so. So at this point right now, the only comment I could make is that's outside, as far as what I've been assigned, that's outside my jurisdiction. It's not a great response. I realize it's not a great response to say, well, what do we do someday when we annex and I have a 4-inch line with no hydrants? Unfortunately, when a community's developed, when a community's growing, you try to work. It's easier in urban areas, because the urban areas, the suburbs and things like that, they have the infrastructure. But if you don't have the infrastructure, you have to balance whether it's reasonable or practical to make them have that infrastructure there in preparation of annexation, or to basically take a gamble, and then someday when you annex, it's up to you now, city or city corporation, to upgrade to that standard. So it is not an easy answer. I think maybe you can sit down and prepare a property, a subdivision, for future annexation. For example, hey, we don't have water yet, but maybe instead of the blow-off valves, we'll put some hydrants in. I don't know if y'all looked at that, but it's in each cul-de-sac there was blow-off valves. Right. Maybe we can put some hydrants in. Maybe instead of going 4, we'll just set some 6s in there. Because right now what's going to happen, if you have a fire, you are going to get Russellville. But what you're going to get, the only way you're going to make any headway is you're going to use tankers. Yeah. So what do tankers need? They need to refill. How do they refill? Not very good through a blow-off, but through a hydrant. So can we make compromises? Can we make some adjustments and maybe make a preparation like, larger diameter lines or things like that, yes, we can. But unfortunately, I've seen this time and time again where we annex a property and it didn't meet the standards, it didn't meet the minimums, but at the time that development was built, it was impractical to make them bring up the standard to those minimum requirements. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but if we know it's required for a 6-inch line to meet the standards, that's not asking a whole lot. I don't have figures on it with me. But
That's purely a compromise suggestion I made. They didn't ask me, Richard, is there anything you would do that? I wasn't asked that. I just offered that as, let's say we wanted to do something that might work out.
Yeah.
I just mentioned that because to me, if you ask me, is there something we can't, it's too costly to do a water tank.
Right.
It's too costly to do this. Right. Is there anything you might recommend? That's just off the top of my head, something I thought of. It's not anything that I suggested or would suggest to approve this project.
Okay, thank you.
But a 6-inch
Yeah, what's going on?
Well, the code requires a minimum 6-inch. So someday, if there is annexation or Mr. Moore and Mr. Poole decide to add fire protection, what they're going to have to do is they're just going to have to lay brand new lines in. That's what they'll have to do to put the hydrants on them. But again, that's their call, and just understand. I've got to kind of be hands off on this, but those are just my insight on how the laws applied and what we look at when we're talking about future annexation. As far as, okay.
And Steve and Zane can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a 3-inch already in Richland Hills. That's as big as it is. We have a 4-inch that's existing coming up Apple. To tie a 6-inch on there, you cannot, I don't think, you can pull a fire flow. You will collapse the other lines. Yeah, it'll collapse them. And so, so we did decide, well, let's do 4-inch because there's 4-inch instead of going 3-inch. 3-inch would probably work, but I decided, no, let's go up to the upper size. Let's get a little more volume, and let's go 4-inch from off the 3-inch and come down and tie it to the 4-inch. And, if there's some concern about flow, like I said, on the 4-inch, there's a fire hydrant. I talked to the developer. We might put 2 more fire hydrants if it would ease people's mind. You can use it for some flow, maybe for a tank, but not for pulling through a fire truck.
Right.
They range.
Yeah, and I think Pottsville is also mutual aid for that location. And yeah, so you got 3. You're at Russellville, Pottsville, and Crow Mountain. They're mutual aid.
All right. Tony, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? We've got a couple of guys on the list here. Is that all right? Were you done?
You need me anymore? Or I'll just stand here?
Yeah, you make an easier target right there, Richard, if you just stay right
So
there.
I do appreciate the service of this commission. I always say that every time I show up here because you've helped so many people and give your time. Appreciate Mr. Jackamore's question there. The issue, Mr. Jackamore, if you allow me, sir, is the fact that look at Cagle Rock or Richland Hills or about any other of another 65 subdivisions I could name in the county. None of them meet those standards. And that those are all in the path of annexation. And so therefore, the ISO issue and things like that are certainly something that you will have to deal with someday in a growth pattern, but none of those areas have ever been held to that standard. And so I think if you look at the spot of where we are compared to where they are, they're at a 3-inch line and they have 1 hydrant. And there's twice as big. We're talking about 28 homes. If you'll remind, this is a small area, 28 homes. We're talking about 28 rooftops. And you are talking about an area that is in the county, is not adjacent to does not touch in any way, shape, or form the city limits, and is outside the 1 mile perimeter. So and we're not asking you to run the water lines, of course. We'll run the water lines and pay for all that, and we've already got the easements and everything else to attach. We're just simply asking to let us buy water from you.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like to thank Mr. Vaughn for his good job and tell you that the idea about and Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments also because he echoes mine. I just don't know how. I'm a pretty good salesman. I've made a pretty good living doing it. I just don't know how to explain that to people. That's not going to potentially create a fear factor that I can't personally take away for them. And I want to disclose it, so I'm going to have to disclose the whole thing, and I just don't know how to do that without possibly running them down to a next town. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Michael, you have anything you want to add? Okay.
I do have a question. Do we have any plans from City Corp to upsize the lines down that way that would take care of sprinklers and more water flow? Do we have any plans to make everything bigger down that way to feed that?
We don't have any immediate plans to do that. This was part of a system that we had an exchange with Tri-County. So it was originally built, and that's why we pointed at John a while ago. We're probably wondering, what are y'all asking him for? But we took this over in exchange for a larger main to serve their properties. So we took over the Cove Landing and Richland Hills subdivisions as they were built. Cove Landing had larger mains for fire protection. Richland Hills basically has a small pump station that pumps to a closed system up the side of the hill. And this would be on the back side of the hill with 28 more lots. So basically an extension of what we already have there. We did talk about, at one time, there was some question of whether it was inside or outside the planning jurisdiction, if it required fire flows. We talked about partnering with these guys, maybe to put a tank up there, but now you're talking about, $500,000, $750,000. We'd have to replace and upsize the lines coming up the side, possibly upside, and then all the lines in the new subdivision would have to be upsized as well. So if that's not a requirement for fire protection, then, it's hard to ask a developer to do it. Obviously, the development goes away. They don't do it. And it's also equally hard to ask all of the other customers that we currently have to subsidize $1 million investment for a new subdivision. So both of those seem unlikely. So it kind of seems like the only way that this subdivision could happen would be to do it the way it's proposed. Now, what we do have is the ability to maybe secure a 100 by 100 spot where a tank could be someday, so that if at such time we move out that direction, we would have a lot situated at the right place where we could construct a tank at that time that could benefit not only this subdivision, but Richland Hills, and possibly backfeed other properties that may develop down on the side of the mountain. But nothing immediate. We thought that it might be an opportunity to act now if they were to chip in a couple $100,000 towards a tank, but if it's totally at the sole discretion of us to fund it or for the subdivision to fund it, neither one of those really made sense right now. So that's kind of where we arrived at where we're at now.
But there was forethought into preparing for that time.
Yes, and there is a location that's set. It's actually shown on the plans where we would construct a tank that could serve both of those areas at such time. We cleared it with the FAA if we were to put one up there, and it would be allowed to put one there. So if at such time annexation and other properties developed around that area and there was a need for a tank to serve possibly more area, true, we would have to upsize some lines at that time. Maybe some spurs to pick up hydrants without replacing all the lines they have now. Obviously, we would be looking at doing that at that time.
That is why I asked the question I did about upsizing the lines. It's not wanting them done right now. I'm just thinking, who's going to be responsible for that if that time comes? And there's a lot of towers that's been built in Russellville for that purpose because of the pressure. So that was my thought process in asking that. If that time comes, and it will, hopefully we're growing, so we'll move out there and let the city grow. But that's kind of what I was thinking, that why not do that up front if that's where you think where we're headed? And I know with 3 inches not going to feed a 6-inch line. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know who's going to be responsible for that if the line does need to be changed. Is it the city's responsibility, or if it is annexed in? I mean, I'm throwing a lot at what is, but I'm just trying to cover all bases that I can think of.
Yeah, I don't see how that could fall on anybody but the city to do that. All the existing property owners, unless there was some type of an agreement made now with them, which would be even harder to sell than the other, I would think, that they were to do that at that point. But it'd be similar to we installed a tank, Bradley Cove, to feed the Cove Landing subdivision. They had mains that were large enough. It didn't really have a reliable, dependable pressure and flow, but now there's a tank there that we constructed on a piece of property that Tri-County preserved for a tank someday, so we've got one up there now, so it would be similar to that. Now, the difference being the lines were sized properly, originally, so we just had to add the tank, but it would be similar to that. I think we could fill the tank with existing line coming up, because even if you're filling through a small, once it's full, it provides the pressure through larger mains. But there, if you were to go into Richland Hills, which is an existing subdivision without it, then you would have to do the same thing there to replace the lines there if you want to provide fire flows. But you would just replace them and install them at strategic points in accordance with the agreement we have with the fire department within the city limits. So you wouldn't obviously have to go down every street to the end of every street. You could probably have a larger, smaller network for fire protection that would serve the purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go right ahead. Thank you, Steve.
Something occurred to me that I just want to make the Planning Commission aware, and I appreciate the questions and the concerns, and you're looking out for the safety of the people that live in that area and also for the city in the future. That's your job, and I appreciate it. But I just want to say this, that Russellville needs that housing development.
Oh, yeah.
We have, and I can just share that we have about 54 employees from an industry in our community that are going to be moving into Russellville in June. We don't have enough houses. And I talked to Tony Moore, Mr. Moore here last week, and I said, "You're going to be ready?" And he said, "We're working on it, and this is a step in getting there." So, we need to do things right, and I'm not asking you to do any of that, but as mayor of Russellville, Arkansas, when I know I've got 54 high-paying jobs coming in our community within about 4 or 5 months from now, I'm worried about those individuals having a place to live, and so we need to encourage development. This property doesn't, as Mr. Moore said, this property doesn't abut the city limits. It's not in our planning boundary. We have no intention, we have no plans to annex that area in the near future. If we do, we're going to have a lot more to worry about than just that area. We got Richland Hills to worry about. We got Cove Landing to worry about. We got a lot of things to worry about that we're going to have to. So just want to caution you a little bit that we don't overreact here and overplan because, and I've got my mayor hat on now. I need those houses because I want those people to move into our community and not get frustrated because we don't have a place for them to live and they run off to Conway or somewhere else.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We got your back.
If I could say
Yeah, go ahead.
only one comment,
Okay. Just one.
and we want to sell these lots, and if we tell them that, hey, it's going to be annexed, you have no choice, that can hurt the sale. What I'm asking is that somehow these people know that if they're buying a house there and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and we're saying 10 years more maybe before it's annexed, if it has substandard fire protection, I think somehow we owe it to those people. Somehow we owe it to people that buy homes that assume that they have police protection, fire protection, houses are built right. Because I can tell you, and Ken can tell you, 2 o'clock in the morning we've been on calls where families have been distraught because we couldn't do anything in certain areas. Water wasn't available. Nobody here was there, but we saw the distraught family where we couldn't do anything. So just, Mr. Jackamore he's been part of this too. So I'm just, my concern is yeah, we're not going to probably annex, but 8 years from now, when everybody here is gone, somebody built or bought a $500,000 home and made some assumptions. So let's just, if we can agree on that, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Richard. Sarah, you have anything to All right, you good? Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Any questions? Anything else for anybody? Okay, we have a motion to approve this request without the annexation requirements as suggested by staff. Do I have a second? Second. Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. You bet. All right. All right, item number 2 here. Sarah, it looks like we've been asked to table the large-scale development requests on East Main. So, guys, I'll entertain a motion to table item number 2 from the... Okay, we have a motion to table item number 2 for next month, until next month. Second. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right, we have the same, Sarah, if you need to jump in and add anything on, okay, all right. Item number 3 has been asked to, been asked to table that one too, the special use permit for industrial use not listed, the cryptocurrency. I'll entertain a motion to table that to next month. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Oh, you have a question? Oh, okay. All right. We have a motion to table. And, okay, we have a second. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. The motion carried. All right. Item number 4. We have a zone text amendment to allow an update to Article 2.18.14, El Paso University area of the zoning code, submitted by the city of Russellville. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you. I inadvertently missed pointing out that the university lofts actually needs this zone text amendment to go through in order for their rezoning to be approved. If you pass this on to city council, this will be listed prior to their university lofts rezoning at the council level. But because those applications were unfinished business at the previous meeting, they were heard first tonight. So I do apologize for that. I have communicated this update to Arkansas Tech University, Ms. Fiorello, who spoke to you all last month, to make sure that they understood that we were making this adjustment. With that, this is a zone text amendment. It is for the El Paso University District. I do have a map up here kind of outlining the area that would potentially be to have this use allowed, to have the ability to rezone their property at some date in the future. This does not change any zoning. It is just a text amendment. In this, I do have that concept plan to remind you what the El Paso with the College Hill zone is. And it does allow mixed use, student housing, so you can have some commercial and multifamily on the same parcel. That's what the intent of that El Paso University District is, to extend that college zone. And so just wanted to kind of highlight that. The existing language really specifically says properties outside of this area and or disconnected from the area shall not be brought into the zoning district. We're making a little change by striking out downtown master plan update, because that doesn't exactly delineate the El Paso zone as it is currently. And so we did change that language to character area identified as the El Paso mixed use district on the zoning map, so that apples equal apples. The El Paso zone is the El Paso zone. But as you'll see beyond that, we're adding some language to that section that says properties outside of this character area and or disconnected from the area. Instead of saying shall not be, we're saying shall only be brought into the zoning district designated as College Hill Zone, so we're only allowing one section of the El Paso University, the College Hill Zone specifically, when at least 50% of the property, proposed property, is located within 750 feet of the Arkansas Tech University campus. And so this is then going to extend that campus university field. Our review comments, it is El Paso University District was formed in 2018. It was created to facilitate walkability and livability. It connects the campus activity with other areas of town. It is meant to maintain the small town ambience and natural heritage of Russellville. And I will point out, because we had an El Paso text amendment that we have recently heard, the Russellville zoning code is currently being revised. And this article has been identified as one area that should not be changed without doing the changes as part of the Russellville zoning code updates. I sent this text amendment to the consultant, and I asked if there were any thoughts, any conditions, any objections that they may have to doing this, to make sure that we're not doing something outside. Since I previously said we shouldn't make any changes to it, I wanted to confirm that if we made any changes to it, we weren't going outside of what we're doing with the Russellville zoning code. And their comments were that since this is not an actual change to any of the requirements of that zone, so we're not changing any of the regulations, we're not changing any of the schedule of uses, we're just allowing areas outside of this zone to now be zoned, that College Hill zone. They did not think it was in conflict with anything that we're doing with the Russellville zoning code updates, and did not object to going through and doing this text amendment. But I did want to point that out, since I have previously stood here and say we shouldn't make any changes. Additions to the zone, so by doing this, it does not change any of the requirements of the zone, but it does allow for opportunities for redevelopment adjacent to the university. And just because we are allowing areas outside also doesn't mean if you're at the end of that 750 feet and nothing else is College Hill zone between you and the university, we would still be looking at it as if we were doing any other rezone application. Is it considered spot zoning? Is it an extension of the university? If you're surrounded by R1, staff would probably still be recommending to deny the application, even though they have the opportunity to potentially do that, because that would be spot zoning. We would see this growing outwards from the university to that 750-foot line. I did just want to zoom in on the areas with the College Hill option, just so you could see a little bit closer to the areas that we're talking about. I did not show any of the areas to the west, because a lot of that is conservation district, and just because it would have the option to change to College Hill zone, the Corps of Engineers probably would not support that request. And so those areas are probably not really included in that, but it is included in the language of options. But as you can see, this is north of the university. It does include that property that we were looking with the micro loft apartments, up to really close to the interstate there. And then the next area is to the west of the university, south of O Street. And some of those areas may redevelop. You could see some properties have the potential there across from the university to potentially look at and redeveloping as College Hill zone. And so with that, staff does recommend forwarding to City Council for approval as a result of the findings that the El Paso University District was created on March 15th, 2018. The zone was created to facilitate walkability and livability as a connector between the ATU campus and downtown, with food, activities, events, and residences. And allowing this extension to other areas surrounding the university will act as a connector to other areas of town. This zone is meant to maintain the small town ambience and natural heritage. The change is consistent with the objectives outlined in the zoning code, and the change does not impact the current efforts to revise the Russellville zoning code. Are there any questions? And, okay, hold on. I don't know if I can zoom in, but I will try.
My question is across Highway 7, that property is already owned by Tech?
Yes, sir, that is owned by Tech, but it is not currently part of what they map as their campus. And so we're just extending it from the campus, which is along Arkansas.
But are we restricting Tech in any way by making this zone on their property?
Great question. Again, this isn't rezoning the property. It's just an option that they would have. So no, we're not restricting them in any way with their property. It just gives them an additional option if they were to go through the zoning process.
So it's not restrictive to really any of the property owners around that, it just gives them another option
Yes, sir.
for development?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Which is the case with our loft project.
Yes, sir. It gives them that option. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, you have any questions for Sarah in regards to this item of business here?
I would make a motion to approve the zone text and change.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second? All right, we have a second. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right, Sarah, is there anything else you can think of, or you want to call it a night?
No, I do have something else.
Well, I
Yes,
had to ask,
sir.
didn't I, guys? I'm sorry.
Nice try with that. We added a discussion item on the agenda, and we'll have a discussion item on the agenda starting this month and moving forward for the Russellville zoning code updates, so that you guys are spoon-fed really a little bit of information of where we are with the zone code updates, but it also gives you an opportunity in that Google Drive to look at the documents that we've put in there. Initially might have put in too many documents. I have revised that to just make it easier for you guys to see. So only the red line versions are in the Google Drive now. If you looked at that before, we had red lines and clean versions, and it was what's going on. So I apologize for that. But at this point, I'm going to go over some of those changes to give you an idea of where we are, let you ask any questions. But additionally, if you could review those documents and give me any questions, any suggestions, anything, so that we're making sure that this is the best zoning code for Russellville. We are asking applicants who are talking to us about potential projects that they're coming in with, giving them an opportunity to look at these. So the micro loft apartments actually looked at the multifamily design standards that we're proposing to let us know if there were anything that just wasn't feasible, because I am a planner. I'm not necessarily a designer or a builder, and so we've been asking some projects that come in to look and give us comments. And so I've given another developer the commercial building design, and we're looking at some landscaping requirements. I've said these are draft, but if there are any comments that they have. And so we are trying to get some real world examples looking at these to give us comments back as well, so that if there is something that's just not practical, it's just not feasible, we can get those, catch those before we go forward and implement the code. So with that, this is kind of our project mission. I've got this slide that Victoria did a marvelous job on getting this graphic together. And I'll be sharing this every time that we talk about the Russellville zoning code updates, because I think it really kind of brings it back to why we're doing these. Obviously, we're talking about economic development, modernization of our zoning code, updates to subdivision, making it equitable for all, but it's really what's the overarching guide. It's that quality of place. We want Russellville somewhere to be where people want to be. So we're designing for people and places, but then we want to make these clear standards. We want everyone to know this is exactly what you're going to expect when you come in, and making it predictable, and we're trying to simplify the process. So at this time, our first public meeting was back in September. We've been doing a few things. We posed one of these, like, first impressions. We have limited landscaping and sidewalk adjacent to the streets. And what do people potentially want? They want some street trees, they want green space. Where do we want to go? And so that's kind of what we've been looking at with this. A lot of developers have had conversations. I know Mr. Garza has also talked with our consultants to give feedback and to give recommendations. And so we're trying to take all of those comments into consideration. So I'm just going to go over 3 sections tonight. Commercial building design standards. And these are just the significant changes because we already have commercial design standards. So we removed the waiver process for commercial building design. You can either apply for and meet the commercial building design standards, or you follow the traditional variance process. It makes it simple because then it's like every other application. You don't have to go, well, is this a waiver or is this just a variance? We also clarified that industrial buildings within an industrial zone, M1 or M2, do not need to meet commercial building designs. That was one of the comments that we received, and so we've made sure that that's written in the zoning code update proposal. We've also included an alternative materials proposal and approval process that allows planning staff, as long as the proposal is in line with the intent of the code, to potentially approve that. So then they wouldn't even necessarily need to go through a variance process. They can just get approval by staff. We did add some design guidelines for articulation for the walls and roof lines, entrances, equipment screening, parking lot layout, and pedestrian circulation. These are actually typically what commercial developments are already doing. So we did add those. And then we are bringing the dumpster enclosure into the code. Right now it's standalone. And so we did bring that in so everyone knows what it is and it's easily accessible. We are proposing to add multi-family building design standards. Again, so the micro lofts apartments has reviewed this. They were already, from my understanding, already proposing to meet this. They didn't have to make any adjustments with what they, when they looked at this. I did let them know it is draft, it's not required. And that's one thing we're pointing out, that everything right now is in draft form. And so they know what the actual requirements are, but then they're reviewing and helping us. So these standards were created for consistency and aesthetic purposes. They do follow the standard process for commercial building design. So that's that staff level review unless requesting a variance. We also included that alternative materials proposal and approval by planning staff as long as it's in line with the intent of the code. We did add verbiage for site planning and design guidelines, again, for the articulation of the walls, roof lines, entrances, equipment, screening, parking lot layout. We did include the dumpster enclosure requirement for multifamily structures, again, just so it's consistent. And then the one thing we are proposing to add with multifamily building design standards is required amenities for multifamily developments with over 50 units, with increased amenities for multifamily developments with over 100 units, over 200 units, so that they just have to add some additional amenities when their multifamily units are that many, so 50, 100, etc. Fences, walls, visibility, and landscaping. Significant changes. We did remove retaining walls from the standard section of fences, walls, and hedges. We added a section on maintenance and installation of fences to include a time frame for maintaining fences that gives us a clear standard so that we can move forward. Right now, it's not clear on what is required. We did update the requirements that require visibility at all intersections, not just within the residential district. We're adding a section on retaining walls to follow standard engineering principles and review by the city engineer when exceeding 4 feet, but it's a review process, not a variance process, and retaining walls are completely separated out. Again, we remove those from that standard section. We are adding a section on landscaping, hopefully, with your approval, with city council's approval. Currently, there is an ordinance that says that we have areas within the right-of-way shall be filled with dirt, planted with grass and or trees and maintained, but does not give any expectations, and by providing clear guidelines, it makes it simpler for everyone. And so in the Google Drive, there is this landscaping table. I know it's really hard to read, and I don't expect that you would read this, but you can pull it up in the Google Drive and look at it. We could also have a copy available for you, but I did want to point out that the 2 columns on the left are single-family, 2-family, and small-scale multifamily residential, and the only landscaping requirement we have for that is 1 residential tree, 1 tree per front yard of each residence. So we're talking a brand new house would have to plant a tree in their front yard. So the landscaping requirements are really going to impact multifamily, residential, commercial, and then industrial. And again, I don't want to go over all of the requirements on this table, but I would appreciate any comments, any feedback that you have on that. And I just want to end with, we have our second public input meeting on the zoning code. We're going to be advertising and trying to get citizens to attend. That meeting will be March 31st at 6 p.m. We'll go over where we are, what we've talked about so far with the zoning code, but then we're also going to be talking about density allowances because we do want to look at allowing higher densities. We're going to be looking at specific conditions on certain applications, maybe moving away from a special use permit, moving towards, well, if you meet all of these conditions, it could be permitted by staff versus going through a special use process, trying to make some applications a little bit easier. And then the last thing, I will be providing a monthly update to the commission so that you guys are kept in the loop on the zoning code updates. Are there any questions? It's going to be a public in-person meeting. It's going to be downstairs in our conference room here at City Hall. Again, that's March 31st at 6 p.m. We would love to have any of you who can attend join us.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Does anybody have any questions for her in regards to what she just said? Okay. All righty. If we have no other, you sure? Okay, all right. All right, we are adjourned.